Mm. And so this silent sanctuary of being, simply being, resting the attention away from the content, away from the mind, and just falling into the simple felt sense of existence, and allowing the simple felt sense of existence to surrender into its source, the silent being. The silent prayer. Mm. Where we recognize that everything that is longed for is in the silence, is the silence. And so we turn away from looking in the external, in the world, and we recognize the pull of the silence is the pull of grace, bringing us to the essence nature, the simple being that is the essence nature of all beings. Just to simply be here, just as you are. There are no moods to create. There's nothing to be done. It is all about recognizing what is always here, underneath the moving, changing, dancing play of the world. To recognize that reality is not the moving, changing. It is not the movie. That reality is the underlying silent essence from which everything arises. We can never feel complete or fulfilled in the play of the world without knowing the essence nature. There will always be a feeling that something is missing or lacking. But if we keep looking for what is missing and lacking in things, we are constantly overlooking that which is before all things. And what is before everything is the essence nature, the being, the silence, the self, the heart. Mm. So we come to the being, to this felt sense of existence. When you feel the simplicity of your own existence, it opens to the infinite spacious being. Just as the I am presence opens to the amness of being, right? So to start with, it can feel as if the felt sense of existence is still connected at the localized point of the body, of the me, just as the I am presence to start with can feel that it is localized. But when we rest in the simple felt sense, it naturally reveals its unadorned, unconditional, unidentified vastness that is unbound, unbounded, right? It is completely free of all identification. And it is to rest here as the simple being that is not identified with anything. And it is here in the silence of being, in the silence of the heart, that the being itself recognizes more and more deeply its very own nature, right? So there is not someone that is having an experience. There is not someone that is getting anything. It is the soft merging of the sense of being someone into simply being. The sense of having form and substance merging into its formless, vast, infinite openness, emptiness, formlessness, right? So as these words come, it is just to feel the resonance where there is recognition. To look with the mind will only bring roadblocks. There is nothing to do. There are not even instructions to follow. The pointings are immediate. The pointings are the resonance of what you already are. The pointings are the resonance of what you already are, of what you have always been. That there is nothing to get, nothing to look for, nothing to become. It is just about recognizing what is always here that never changes. What is always here that is underneath the moving, changing. And the simple invitation to relax the attention through the felt sense of existence into the simplicity of being. The being already is. The being has never become anyone or anything. The being is always the formless, infinite, immaculate, pure and innocent truth that never ever takes form, never ever becomes anything. And yet all appearance appears by virtue of the being. Everything appears from the being. But it is the being that is reality. In truth, there is no illusion. Even the illusion is illusory. And it is just to come to know the being that simply is, that is to be the living answer to every question. It is where the mind, the moving, changing consciousness collapses, relaxes into its source, into the simplicity of knowing itself instead of needing to know more things. And the great discovery of what has always been here. The great discovery of the self that is ever shining as itself, the discovery of what God really is, what Ma really is, this ever shining divine reality that is ever whole and perfect and never ever divides, never ever fragments, does not divide to create separation, never ever divides. The sense of separation itself is the whole in appearance, but that which is true and pure and immaculate never ever divides. And so what you are is absolutely one with what is, never divided, never separate, always whole, always pure and simple. And in the felt sense of being, the recognition of this is here, and the recognition of it can be felt as a resonant knowing, the being itself, knowing itself, and resonating in the aliveness of knowing itself, resonating in the aliveness of knowing its own presence. There has never been anything other than this whole, pure, immaculate oneness. Everything is this. It's not created by it. If it was created by it, it would mean there would be two. What is just is, and has never been anything other. And so this constant invitation of satsang is to be in the company of yourself, to be in the company of this truth that you are, to be in the company, the companionship of your eternal knowing of who you are, to turn the attention, to rest the attention in the silence, the silent sanctuary of being, the simple surrender that recognizes that truth is here and here alone. All ideas of the worldly pursuits are all part of the fabric of concept, all part of belief, memory, and attachment to past and imagining of future. There are many ways that the mind can create all kinds of concepts and ideas to validate itself in order to keep itself alive in the worldly sense. Ideas that you need to do this, you need to do that, you have to do this work, you have to follow this. But none of it is true. Whatever the mind thinks is true is not true, because truth has no mental waves dancing with concepts and ideas. Truth is still, is silent. It is also wildly flowing in its dynamic nature, but in its essence, it is still and whole and pure. True wisdom is intelligence that is here in the being. True wisdom is not any kind of worldly knowledge or mental understanding. It is only the mind that gives weight to mental understanding, because the mind is constantly looking to be right, to confirm itself, and to hold itself in this idea of separation that is familiar. It's a habit. It's not about annihilating the mind. It's not about annihilating the ego, or any of these concepts that can even be creating fear for the mind. It is to recognize that what mind is, what ego is just patterns of consciousness that are dancing in a small dance of misunderstanding. And to recognize that there can be no truth in trying to create new patterns in consciousness, because any pattern of consciousness is an appearance. It's not the source, the reality, right? Every pattern is the appearance. So if we're looking for wholeness in the appearance, we will only ever find fragments. We will never ever feel the fullness, true happiness, unconditional love. When we are looking in the world and concepts and ideas, it is only in the incredible simplicity of being, in the silence, in the stillness, when we turn away from the content, when we relax into simple being, into the felt sense of openness and emptiness, where we can witness the habit to identify with thoughts and to perpetuate the habitual dance of egocentric patterning, right? Just the patterning of consciousness, moving in habitual, conditioned, programmed ways. It's only when we open into the vaster consciousness, the first layer of consciousness that we open to is the layer that can witness, that can watch, can observe. When we have the ability as consciousness to observe the mind, to watch the moving, changing, we are already in a vaster, more expanded, more free part, let's say, still of the essence nature of consciousness. We're opening into the stillness. We're opening into more of ourself, more of the self, more of the being. But there's deeper to go, right? So the ability to witness and watch is grace indeed, incredible grace. And here, as we witness, as we watch, observe the moving, changing, observe the thought waves that we call mind, observe the body, the feelings, the sensations, the emotions, the tensions, right? And as we observe it, can we just feel it as a field of energetic movement, aliveness, instead of following the narrative and the commentary and identifying with the thoughts? It is to witness and notice that when there is identification with a thought, it will lead to the next thought and the next thought. And the felt sense of what you are is the mind and the body and the person. The simple pointing is just to relax, come to the felt sense of existence, and fall into the being that is the formless, infinite vastness. And feel the grace, the simplicity of this relaxation into essence. How it feels like a sanctuary. That there's no wanting here. There's no need here. That in this moment, there's a fulfillment. There's a happiness. A simple contentment that needs nothing. That just is as it is. In the felt sense, that is this recognition. It is this recognition that deepens the sense of being in the being itself. And here, the ability to witness and watch the moving changing. But it gets so much more interesting when that which is watching the moving changing actually watches itself, becomes aware of itself, witnesses itself, let's say. And then the felt sense of that which is witnessing and watching collapses even more into just simply being. The being is still aware, but its focus is upon its own being, knowing itself. And here, the waves of the mind, the consciousness that moves and changes, is naturally stilled, quietened. It starts to rest more deeply because everything is longing to be resting in this wholeness, in the being. And when, let's say, the felt sense of being docks in the remembering of its own essence nature, everything that is longing for this wholeness can feel and recognize, oh, this. And there is like a magnetic pull here, like a force field that starts to be recognized. And it's this alive resonance of your very own self, your very own being, recognizing the subtle frequency of its own being. And this force field, this magnetic pull, it's like a draw into itself. It's where the felt sense of longing, it gets so strong because what it is longing for can actually be felt as what is longing for it, right? So if this thinks that it's longing for God, if this thinks that it's longing for wholeness, as it starts to feel wholeness, it recognizes that wholeness, that God is longing for it, right? As it gets closer. And this force field, this pull, is because the longing here and the longing here is recognized to be magnetically drawn because it's one, it's the same. It's not someone, right? This little person longing for this big God, this big mother. It's that this vastness has been longing for this to remember by enlivening this beating heart, right? This pull of longing here. And as the longing starts to recognize itself, it's like it's being pulled. And this force field, right, between the seeming two, it's already one, but it starts to swirl and come alive and heat up and spin and dance and feel like this exploding passionate heart that's so drawn to itself, right? Because it's already the same. It's already one. It's being pulled, drawn into itself. But it's not being drawn from one side into the other. It's being drawn from both sides into this remembering. And the remembering is the being recognizing, awakening to the remembering of itself. So this awakening happens in the being. It wakes up from its misunderstanding. It wakes up to recognize that it has always been awake. It wakes up to the awakeness of this field that is alert and alive, right? So it's not a change, it's not a becoming. It's a relaxation and a seeing what is always here, right? It's the aliveness of the heart illuminated in the recognition that the heart is not my heart, that the heart is the heart of God. It is the heart of silence. It is the heart of being. It's the heart that is the mother. And so the recognition is this illumination that brings the pull into recognizing what is already illuminated, already awake, already alive and alert as the pure awareness knowing itself. And hear the grace, hear the simplicity, hear the innocence of the immaculate being, knowing itself just as it is, and focused only upon itself, and not following the instincts of the world and the environment to interact and to be, for the attention to be pulled, for the absorption in the being to be everything, to be all that matters. That the content of this moment no longer has the same allure, because the shining radiance of the being, the shining radiance of your own heart, the self, everything that has been longed for is recognized to be right here. And when the longing is rich and deep and mature, the recognition of this force field, this pull, and it feels like a deeper absorption into the being, deeper into the silence, that we come to know silence as the unmoving, unchanging sanctuary. But we deepen to come to know silence as the being. We deepen to come to know silence as God. We come to know the deepest silence as the mother, as the divine immaculate light, divinity itself. And we come to recognize that that light is shining in appearance as everything, but it is never becoming something other than itself. It is never separating and dividing. It is never becoming something different. It is never, ever becoming two, but it is shining as the multiplicity and diversity. And yet, in essence, it is only ever one. And everything that appears is shining as the one, concealing its essence nature, and yet shining in its essence nature. But it can only be recognized when the essence nature is recognized. When we come to recognize essence nature, the oneness is the recognition of the oneness with all, not in a new age way, right? It's not a concept. It's a oneness that is whole and complete. It is a oneness that only knows itself, and so every sense of other collapses into this divine, incredible recognition, remembering, recognizing, falling into the true wisdom that is only ever known in the heart of the being, in the heart of the self knowing itself. It is only ever known in God, we could say, in the Mother. And then ever clarifying its depth of vision, right? All existence is the appearance of God, but God never changes. Ma never changes, right? And you are that. You are that perfection already. And the grace of the enlivened heart that longs for this truth, longs for freedom, longs to be one with its source. It is born out of that which already knows. All seeking is born out of that which already knows. That you and what you are longing for are already one. It is already done. And yet it has to be known in the light of consciousness. We could say your consciousness, your unique laws of nature, right? It has to be known. And when it is known, it is embodied. As long as there is a human body, it is known in the being and it is embodied. But you are not someone separate. You are not divided. You are already the one that is longed for. So there is no doing, there is no becoming, there is no achievement, there are no goals. So it is to let go of all spiritual ambition, all journeys, all ideas, all concepts, and come to the being and know that holiness does not get more holy. Can have so many concepts about what the holy, what the sacred, what the divine is. But we could say that the purest divinity, it is everything, just as it is. It's recognizing the extraordinary in the ordinary. It is recognizing the essence, nature of God, of the Mother in absolutely everything, right? And you know this when you know yourself. When you know yourself, you know the same self in everything. Let us say we come to know the self first. And then there is this ever deepening refinement into the most exquisite and extraordinary remembering. Refining and refining. And as we refine, on the surface of life, we are forced to purge and transform. We're forced to let go of everything that we are not in order to know the fullness of what we are. We are never losing anything, and everything that is happening, even if it feels dramatic and intense, it is only ever happening for us. It is the flow of grace, the flow of love. It is God itself offering every single situation so we can know this truth in everything. We can know God, the Mother, in everything. So as these words come, It is to recognize that it is not about the mind's understanding. It is about what is enlivened in the heart. What is being recognized? What is alive here now? What feels true? Where is this knowing enlivened as the being and knowing itself in your heart, in your direct experience? It's not a personal experience, but your direct experience brings you into the being, brings you out of person, out of someone, into the open, vast emptiness of being no one. And who could ever imagine that being no one could be so full and rich and shining? That there could be such love here, such radiant happiness and joy here in the simplicity of silence. Who could ever imagine that fullness is in emptiness? Who could ever imagine the beauty, the richness, the abundant flow of grace that is here when we turn away from the content and we find ourselves flowing and being carried in the oneness of grace, the flow, the river of grace, flowing into the vast nectarine ocean of bliss. And as we flow in the river, we already know the essence nature. And now we feel that force, right? The force that moves the river to the ocean, right? It knows where it's going. It's flowing towards the ocean. And yet somehow it's also by the tides. It's being pulled, right? It's this force field, right? Where what is longed for, you can't tell which side it's on. It's just this draw, and it's so hot and it's so alive, right? It's just spinning. It's this flowing consciousness. It's finer than energy, right? Energy, we might say, is the denser layers of consciousness. But as we come to the finer layers of consciousness, it's so fine. It's the Shakti. It's hot. It's alive. It's luminous. It's shining, and it's flowing, and it's so alive. It's dynamic, right? It already knows itself, and it knows what it wants to discover more of itself, right? The river wants to get to the ocean, and the tides flow, right? You see how nature is constantly reflecting this incredible naturalness of how that force, that pull. And when we are one with this and we are being carried, and we stop trying to control and be the knower in a separate sense, right? A mind that knows, a mind that is controlling, a mind that wants or needs or is holding on. When we just let go, we are moving in the incredible flow, the naturalness, nature, naturalness, wholeness, just like the seasons, just like the moon and the sun and the weather patterns. It's all just flowing. It's mirroring to us what our true nature is. And when we let go and we actually open in our essence nature, we start to see the naturalness of the natural world, let's say, instead of looking at the world of things and distractions and what I want and what I need. We are one with the natural world, the natural flows, right? and we recognize the incredible reflections of our own essence nature, and we see, feel the resonance of oneness. The seeing, of course, is clear vision. We recognize in the whole naturalness that there is perfection. There are the cycles that are moving and changing, and yet there is this shining, radiant essence nature, that everything is just happening. It's just happening. And the essence nature of everything changes not. It is eternal and timeless and here now. Right? So here we are in the simplicity of being. When you feel the resonance of these words, you are feeling yourself. You are not listening to someone. What is speaking and what is listening is the same. The words are the words of your own self, coaxing, carrying, enlivening, illuminating this radiant light in your own heart, so there can be a turning inward and recognizing the radiant light of God, of the Mother, is shining in you, as you, and has never ever been anything other. We can be so distracted with things and being someone, and this crazy dance of this cycle on the surface of life, to have power, to be famous, to be known, to be seen as someone. And it's all such nonsense, because it's transient, it's temporary, and it's just a distraction. It's just a way to waste another human life, trying to be someone important and seen, trying to gather more things, bigger things, right? To be wealthy, to be, let's say, in a worldly sense, to have things that feel like stability and security, to accumulate. But it means nothing. It means nothing. What you are in truth is what you will be when the body drops. You are that now. You are that eternal one now. The great service of this human life is to recognize the essence nature and to be stripped of everything that we think is important. To let go of all the pulls to be someone, and to find the utter blissful contentment in being no one. That abundance is here, richness is here, and it does not look like things. Here in the ashram of the heart, where we are flowing in the graced service, that our human life is in service to God, as God, we could say, to the Mother, that we are in full service in every moment by saying yes and yes and yes to just what is here. And sometimes that will look like lots of grace of gorgeous things coming our way. And sometimes that will look like it all being stripped. The grace is not to create moods, but it's to know that whatever is here is the will of God, and to receive the grace, whether it's looks like worldly abundance or whether it looks like worldly emptiness that the mind might feel is scarcity. When we come to the richness of the silent heart, we know that it matters not what the external appearances are, that you can have it all and you can take it all, can give it all away, because it never belongs to us. We never own anything. It's all Ma's ashram, her worldly ashram, right? And we are here in service. Let us find our true place at the feet of life, one with life, right? Not holding any control or superiority over anything. Because here is the true aliveness. Here is the true radiant luminosity of the heart. Here is the true richness. Here we are only moving as we are moved. And it looks like the whole wild diversity of the surface of life. It is just to recognize that this moment is perfect. This moment is the will of God. This moment is Ma's appearance as this. It is the beat of her heart. It is the bliss of her heart. And it is to receive this grace exactly as it is, whether it looks like ease and smoothness in this moment, or whether it looks like intensity. The only way is, let's say, the way of surrender. The way of surrender is to say yes. The only way out of intensity, of pain, of challenge, is to feel it, is to not resist it, is to know that this too is her. This is her grace, her love, and it is here for you to know all the way through what you are in truth, to feel the extraordinary radiance of your own divine wholeness. So as these words come, it is just to feel where you feel the resonance that is already the knowing. It's not someone's knowing, it is an alive knowing. And it beams, it shines its brilliance. It's not to try to quantify or qualify it. And it's to recognize if the mind tries to co-opt and make it its own, and then to give it back, jump off the ledge of someone, surrender it back. Whatever is seen, whatever is realized, surrender it back into the whole, to keep surrendering it back in. The flow of life, the flow of grace is a perpetual surrender into itself. So come to recognize this perpetual surrender of life into itself. Everything that is recognized as clear vision, to surrender it back in, to surrender it back in, and not hold on or grasp it. Recognize that it belongs to no one. And when it belongs to no one, it's always here and it's always free, right? When someone says, I've lost it, I don't feel free anymore, it's to find through the letting go and the relaxation, what can never belong to anyone is the eternal, infinite, immaculate freedom of the wide open heart that is the divine wholeness, that is God, that is the Mother, Ma. That we meet in her, as her, for her, by her, right? There is only her. And where the resonance in the heart says yes and sings its silent song, It's to fall into this nectarine, blissful luminosity and drink it in. Drink in your own knowing, knowing that the true knowing is one knowing. Drink it in, the nectarine bliss of your own knowing and the simple being, the felt sense of being yourself, natural. It's not abstract. It's being yourself right here, embodied, but knowing you are not the body, you are not the mind. We could say we turn inwards, away from the content to know the essence nature. And when we know the essence nature, we turn again to the natural world, to see the shining essence nature in everything. And then we move through the flow of refinement, where we dissolve everything that feels to be separate. We dissolve it into the being. We dissolve, we could say, our own creation. We dissolve the creation of the mind and its filters. We dissolve all of our opinions and judgments and resistances. We dissolve all our wants and desires into the being. We dissolve our appearance, the appearance that we create through our distortions. We create all of these appearances and situations through distorted consciousness, where we believe to be someone. And when we know our essence nature, we have this incredible capacity to dissolve it all by being aware and receiving, allowing everything that has been pushed down to surface, everything that has been hidden, everything that has been denied. We allow it all to surface so that it comes to know itself in the light of divine wholeness. So there's nothing left that feels that it is separate. And this is the divine work of refinement. And much of the human life will be involved in dissolving and purifying and refining. And as we purify and refine, we fall more deeply into the essence nature. We can access more of the fineness. We can access more because we are more deeply absorbed. We are more deeply absorbed in our divine wholeness because the threads of the discordant that create the tricky situations on the surface of life are being pulled in, woven back in to the unified tapestry of the divine heart. So nothing is outside of this wholeness. Nothing is abstract, but it is to see the play of the world in the full illuminated big picture view. And we see this big picture illuminated view from the zoomed out being that's watching the world, that can see the world is in me. That it's just happening, just flows of consciousness. The divine flow, divine will. And here, the silent prayer, thy will be done, thy will be done. The surrender of my will to thy will. A true service, the true karma yoga, to meet everything that seems to create division and refine it refine it and refine it into the fineness where it remembers itself as bliss. We could say that the sticky, intense situations that surface from the subconscious or the unconscious, when they are felt and met in the light of wholeness and simply felt, these flows of consciousness that's flowing in discordant patterns that feels like disturbance is able to be magnetized to what it is truly longing for, to remember its essence nature. All the consciousness remembers its essence nature. And we could say that our human life and what we think of as the body is the distillery. It's the vehicle for feeling and collapsing the patterns of consciousness and refining them into the remembering of bliss, the nectarine bliss of being. Everything comes home through what we feel to be the body. And as it comes home, what we feel to be the body is actually refined to become a finer and finer distillery, right? To be able to, it starts off working to collapse all sense of personal, and then it works to collapse all sense of the karmic threads that are entangled into the collective. And then you are free of the collective, right? You don't need to entangle. The deepest work is to be free of the collective. Of course, there will be times where we get a little too close and we're pulled into moving some, let's say, a pattern, a discordant pattern that's ready to collapse. Let's say when there's a discordant pattern ready to collapse in the collective, something will arise in our own life that feels like a situation that creates a trigger to trigger you to do the work, right? It pulls you into do your part in collapsing a pattern in the collective. But it's all one consciousness, right? But when we are living in the knowing of the essence being, we are completely free of the same kind of churning, victimized, being pulled around, right? So we are living in a freedom. We're still doing the work to refine and really to pull all of the projections and threads back into the being. What a magnificent, intelligent dance it is. And that this human life is so far from what we imagine it to be with the mind. So perhaps you can feel more of the resonance of truth. You can feel more of the resonance of the divine service, resting in the infinite, vast field of consciousness. You start to feel the resonance and the aliveness of the intelligence. And as you feel the intelligence of consciousness, and it can be subtly perceived here, you start to feel the recognition of what is being spoken of. Starts to be recognized as clear truth. But it's not belief or concept. It's your own truth. It's your own service. It's your own intelligence and your own knowing. And it's one with the knowing, the intelligence, the flow of grace, one with the one pure field of consciousness, knowing only itself, recognizing this pure awareness recognizing the self, the being, the Atman. And the Atman recognizes that it is Brahman, God. And Brahman starts to recognize the source of its own light, let's say. It's wordless, but let's say light. And here, the mother could be called Parabrahman, pure divinity, divine wholeness. These are not levels or layers. They are the depth of absorption into your own nature, your own true divine nature. And it is not linear that you fall to one, to the other, to the other. There's a certain sense of the absorption, but you can also touch into certain qualities of this everywhere. At any moment, here now. Does not matter how it is received. It is what is happening in the unseen that is important. The words speak to the laws of nature, and in the unseen is where the magic is happening. And as you open to the subtle and more refined layers of the being, you can start to feel in your own being a deepening, a deeper absorption, a deeper recognition, a deeper stillness. Can start to recognize that this is not reality. That reality is the silence, is the being. And as you fall deeper into the reality, the appearance of life is a reflection of that. It is the natural world. It is the naturalness. It includes everything, but you are seeing the subtle luminosity of the essence nature in absolutely everything. So just to notice the depth of silence, the stillness, or perhaps the silence feels very dynamically alive, both the same, two sides of one coin, we could say, the deep, silent, still, peaceful, and the dynamic silence, the alive flow, where the being is in the knowing of itself and flowing. But still here, a depth of peace, an undisturbable peace. and you are this peace.